Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Our House 21, and I decided to do something a little bit different this time. Now, I've noticed on YouTube that there are a lot of guys out there trying to get to 100 mile an hour using track test rustlers and actually a variety of other configurations, and some have been pretty successful and some have not. So I decided to try to take a physics-based approach to try to dispel some of the rumors or some of the myths associated with what it takes to get a vehicle to 100 miles an hour. Now, some guys might, jump in and say, well, what credentials do I have, to speak on this topic, seeing that I haven't made it to 100 miles an hour yet myself. However, being an engineer and a former flight test engineer at that, one of the things that I've learned professionally is that you have to take a build-up approach in order to try to make it, figure out what works and what doesn't work for your particular application, and build on that success. So even though I haven't made it yet, we got a lot of math, I've got a lot of research done just to try to get me along that goal. So at the very least, I think the methodology applies to a lot of the applications out there. So let me just jump right on in. So myth number one, 6S LiPo is the only way to go. Now, you might say, well, what's the myth about this? Everybody out there that I've seen breaking 100 mile an hour is doing it with 6S LiPo, so that's not a myth. Well, just because that is the method that has been used so far does not mean that it is the only way. And those guys have been successful primarily because the 6S LiPo route is, quite frankly, it's a very powerful, the Mamba Monster configuration is definitely a high-powered way to go. However, if you look at the equation right here, power is equal to voltage times current. With the 6S Mamba Monster configuration, you're turning at 24 volts, which essentially lets you be able to push less current in order to get the power that you want out of the system. But the systems have way more power available to them than they're using on the high end. If you refer back to Draven's 114 mile an hour video, he makes a comment that he was only at about a quarter throttle. The reason why that is such is because if you refer back to one of my earlier videos, my RC Physics 3, where I talked a lot about acceleration and such, F equals ma, force equals the mass times acceleration, you use the most current at the point that you are going with your maximum acceleration in most situations. So for typical RC applications where you're, let's say, stadium truck racing, you can push over 100 amps in current, but that's because you're trying to drive the vehicle at high acceleration out of corners and such like that. So that's where most of the RC's power dissipation, traditionally happens. However, for speed configurations, now you're trying to shift things to the high-end, high-power generation. Is really being limited by the amount of aero drag and mechanical drag that's being responded to by the system. So really, you're not in the 6S Mamba Monster configuration, you're not using all the power available to you. You're actually being limited by the amount of power that you can put down to the ground, which is one of the reasons why you see the guys have to be very easy on the throttle so that they don't spin out the rear wheels, as I experienced firsthand in my RC Physics video 7, where I lost it at 73 miles an hour and went to a curb. So you can still get the same amount of power on a 12 volt system, but now you're pushing twice as much current. So it shifts everything down to a consideration of, can your power system handle running double the current in order to for a sustained period of time without literally melting things. So, well, that puts it into thermal considerations and everything else. So it's not necessarily a question of can the system handle it, because I've demonstrated it experimentally on bench tests that my power system can handle well over 100 amps. So it's really just an issue of putting the power to the ground. Therefore, 6S LiPo may not be the only way to go. Okay, I made that a little bit more long-winded than I wanted to, but you guys get the idea. Okay, on to myth number two. And I'll try to keep these other ones kind of short. So, the myth is trial and error is the only way. And I say nah. Because, I mean, as you could probably guess from just the name of the channel, I think that, it's RC physics. So, I think a little bit of math, a little bit of experimentation, just like real physicists use, can go a long way in trying to help us further the hobby. So, you see here's my wrestler predicted speed sheet. And I've been going through and using a steady build-up approach, using my GPS and using my power meter to try to collect data along the way to verify that the information in my sheet is accurate and that I can properly predict the next steps that my wrestler will do before I move on to the next steps. That same basic approach can be used to build up and move forward and help to get all the other models and everything else that I'm doing synced up with reality and moving in the right direction. And I think that this is pretty much the only way to go. Because anything other than that, you're just feeling around in the dark, and you're going to cost yourself a lot of time and money and effort. That leads us on to myth number three: speed is inherently expensive. And I say, yeah, kinda, but not really. Because I think that applying a little bit of the scientific method can save you lots of time and lots of money. Now, I compiled a little list of some of the big speed run money sinks and hazards, just to try to be a talking point to try to help people out. And, one of the big ones that you probably hear a lot about, and it's kind of the cost of doing business, but overpriced and underperforming batteries can really kill your performance. Now, specifically, I'm talking about the issues of voltage sag and the issues of just overall price. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, voltage sag is when you pull a lot of current out of a high power battery, the voltage actually drops a little bit. The RC aircraft guys fight this all the time because they're pulling lots of current out of small batteries trying to extend runtime. And the same thing applies for us for the RC cars. The problem is when you're trying to pull 100, 150 amps sustained out of a battery pack, that takes a lot. So even decent quality batteries don't always give you decent performance. However, you don't necessarily have to jump to the most expensive battery on the market, because I actually got burned where I bought a moderately priced battery, my Venom 3S pack, which is 20C, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. But the the sag on it is okay if I'm just going to be bashing around and that kind of thing. But for speed run, it drops way too low. But by contrast, check out some of Jang's videos over on RC. The Gens Ace packs and also the Turnigy Nanotech batteries. Very high quality packs, stand up very well against packs that cost many times as much, and they're cheap. So I'm a cheap bastard, I admit it. So I think that experimenting with some of the lower price hardware and finding some good gems is worth the effort. Sometimes you have to kiss some frogs before you find a prince, but it's worth it. So next up, myth number two, or I should say item number two, is overpriced and underperforming speed tires. Okay, so this is real self-explanatory. Not all tires are created equal. Some tires that are advertised as being speed tires aren't. And the dangers of a ballooning tire is pretty obvious. When the tires balloon, some tires don't really balloon in a predictable manner. So with any ballooning, I think, is a bad thing, because you're increasing the ride height of the vehicle. You're letting air get underneath the vehicle. So even if the tire holds together, the handling characteristics are going to change. And unless you have a really pristine environment, that can cause really bad things. And as you can see from the videos, I had some really bad experience with these Proline dirt hogs ballooning on me, causing me to do a nice end over pancake flip and pretty much destroyed the car. So I had to rebuild it from the ground up. But I took that as a learning experience. Those are not speed tires. But similarly, I actually had a bad experience with my Jayco foams, which are speed tires. These guys are awesome tires. I've done dry bench tests, where I spun them up to the equivalent of over 100, like 120 miles an hour, and had no expansion, well, very, very tiny expansion, but virtually no ballooning for traditional. But it's a foam tire, you shouldn't see ballooning. But awesome tire mechanically, but they just didn't have the adhesion I needed, and they spun out at about over 70 miles an hour and caused me to slap into a curb and have the lovely mess that you see before you. I mean, and this is a case of a high quality tire having issues. So, so like I said, it may not be the real fault of the tire because it was a little bit cooler that day, but it goes back to what I was saying about the build-up approach. You have to know what you're getting into and know the performance capabilities of your equipment before you try to push. So am I going to continue with the J Codes? Probably, because I think I have some more tricks with tire compound, or just some of the other uh, pointers that I picked up on the internet. So I might be able to get them to stick, but in all honesty, I might just end up having to change to something else, or I might have to just focus my efforts on my four-wheel drive car, where I'm not putting as much stress on the one pair of the tires in order to try to get me to my goal. So I'll keep you guys posted on that and see what it takes. All right. So my last 2 points. And I'll take these together. Aluminum is not always your friend. And Squirrel did a great video on this, so I won't rehash all his points. But in essence, aluminum is expensive. If you break a part, you're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of money trying to replace that part. And honestly, a lot of the parts that they make out of aluminum, they're really over designed and they're overweight, to be honest. So if you go and make a fully aluminum car, it's going to be heavy. Heavier cars take more energy to accelerate. You're going to end up making your job trying to get to 100 miles an hour even harder. And honestly, I've talked about designing things to fail. If you take too much aluminum and put it into your system, you could actually force your failure mechanisms into places that you don't want them to fail. Would you rather have a cheap drive shaft fail or your transmission fail? It's that kind of thing. All right, and thermal kills everything. You're trying to, especially in my case where I'm trying to focus on high current instead of high voltage, stuff gets hot. Stuff gets really, really hot, and heat kills electronics, where you end up, getting lubricants failing inside of motors that cause things to jam up and fail and, destroy things. Excess heat builds up and causes things to go out of alignment. And quite frankly, aside the speed controller, if I'm pushing too much current for too much time and it causes things to heat up too much, stuff can catch on fire. And I've actually seen videos of cars that have been pushed a little bit beyond their limits bursting into flames and burning. So, take some time, look over your vehicle, try to focus on, where things need some help and where things don't need help. A little smart application of brain power can save you a lot of money and a lot of pain and agony. So, I'm a strong believer that, this is a hobby that, I enjoy breaking my cars because I enjoy building them up and I enjoy trying to make them work better. So if you're not breaking things, then you're not trying hard enough. But you can be a little smart with it. Not everything that you break needs to be broken. So, I think I've beaten that dead horse, but I firmly believe I'm going to get to 100 mile an hour once the spring comes. I'll keep you guys, informed along the way. But until then, I'll go ahead and sign off from this video and let me know what you think. Actually got a couple of dislikes on my last video, so don't just dislike. Let me know what you don't like, and then I'll try to turn around. I'll try to improve it. All right, because I'm not just making these things for myself. I'm trying to make these for everybody so that we can all move forward together. This is pretty free flowing way information. And on that topic, if you see anything in here that you want me to share, or like, for example, if any of you guys want a copy of my speeds prediction spreadsheet or a version of it, drop me a line. Let me know, and I'll just go ahead and I'll send it to you via email. It's no big deal to me. So, the way I feel it, we're all trying to go in the same direction. So if I can help one of you guys get a little bit further along, or if one of you guys can help me get further along, then we're all better off and we're all stronger in this effort together. All right, so until next time, this is Our House 21 signing off, and remember, fly, fix, fly, break it, fix it, get up and run it all over again. All right, you guys take care. Happy New Year.